Welcome to the Amitrace podcast. I'm Tom White, and today a very special episode. One of the great things that I have experienced in my time at Amitrace is that anytime there's a need, Amitrace has always been there to kind of the leadership has always been there to kind of fill that need. And as we've continued to grow, that need for me has been helping with some of the training, helping with some of the standard processes, helping with finding new ideas and executing on a bunch of stuff. And I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Michael Hamilton. Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. And you are 5 working days into your time with us. What's been the most interesting thing so far?
Definitely that there's a barbecue pit smoker in the break room that you just wheel out back. I came in this morning. There's nothing better on a Monday morning than just smelling wood chips, getting ready to smoke some meat. As a Georgia boy, barbecue is the way to my heart. Always has been.
Yeah, the Traeger was an addition. Honestly, it was very funny. We were in Nashville at the ACTE conference, and Faraz goes, "I think I'm going to do it." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I think I'm going to go ahead and buy the Traeger." And I was like, "Okay."
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
we're breaking it in. Not breaking it. I think Pete cooked something a couple weeks ago on it. We're going to do some chicken and sausage here in just a little bit.
The seasoning is the most important thing.
Yeah. So want to introduce everybody to you. Want to kind of I want to hear what you say your job is. So we'll start there. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so my job title at Amitrace is customer success, and it's really kind of a new department we're spinning off because we have a lot of engineering folks here that are really great with the technical things, building out the racks. We have our training arm that Tom just owns and really does a great job with. And then we also kind of have these sales and special projects. And so there's kind of been, as things are growing, there's been these needs for how to take care of our customers after they get their equipment put in, right? Because, we're building a studio for you. We're setting up your Vid Pod. We create all these things, and we send it out. But there's really, in between when you get your equipment and in 5 years, when you're ready to get your next set of equipment, a lot of AV companies who I've worked with over the years, you kind of don't hear from them in the middle unless something's literally broken. And so what we're trying to do is, especially in the education space, there's so many opportunities to connect that kind of in-between space. And so I'm kind of charged with coming in and figuring out how to make that experience with Amitrace be awesome that entire time, not just when it's time for an upgrade.
And that's one of those things that, from my time in the classroom and my time here in the last 2.5 years that, I always felt like I couldn't serve. Like it was, my job is at its root sales. So I got to be out, finding new studios to build. And I always felt bad because I always felt like I did just enough to be like, okay, well, we did a good job, but we didn't do a great job. So really excited that you've joined us. And your story with Faraz is kind of like mine. Like you kind of circled around him for a while and then eventually.
Will they, won't they?
Yeah. And then he lassoed you in. Talk about what you did before you joined us.
So honestly, I got to go literally all the way back. You said about talking about your time in education. I'm going to talk about my time in education. Back in 1952, I believe it was 2009, 2010, I was a senior at Parkview High School. And I was in the broadcast classroom, and we had a beautiful studio set up by a company called Amitrace. I think Faraz was probably in college then when his dad was running the ship, and that was the first I ever encountered Amitrace. Their logo was everywhere, and I actually it was kind of the same thing we see now, where the school had put in all this great stuff for us. We loved it, but there was no way to know how to use it all, right? So me and a buddy, we took home the user manuals. Some we had to Google online and look them up, took them home, read them over a weekend, because we wanted to be Saturday Night Live. We wanted to be CNN. We were ready to, we were going to change the industry in as high school news. And we kind of figured it out. We now we'd call it learning by burning, and just trying it all out. And what I found out later when I got my first job after high school, it was kind of my college job, was doing high school sports with a company called PlayOn Sports that Faraz had worked with for a few years. And so I wanted to just kind of get my hands in there. I was going to Emory University for film theory, right? So a lot of really great theory stuff, but not a lot of hands-on stuff. So I wanted to learn actually how to be helpful. And so I got this job doing, right when high school sports was kind of starting to be streamed and put on TV, I would work there. And ran into Faraz working on our crews, and found out, oh, he's Amitrace. And he was all the stuff that I had learned on. My actual very first editor I ever used before Adobe or Final Cut was called Studio XI, which I believe was actually a product that Faraz had a instrumental hand in creating and customizing for students. So it was like just complicated enough, but just easy enough for kind of a green person to learn. So, but from that day on, I really credit all my success since then in broadcasting and media to those foundational years, in school. I went to Parkview and to South Gwinnett, which are both of Brookwood High School's big rivals, which is where Faraz went, and so we've always ribbed each other over the years over that. But once I was running around wrapping cables for those first few years, and once I got good enough to get in the TV truck, that's really what you want. I was doing sound. The sound guy sat right next to the director and the technical director, who was Faraz. And so me and him just sat next to each other for years, and I just asked him a million questions. I watched what he did. I saw him take a TriCaster and do amazing things with it. And really from then, we just always kept in touch, After I worked in sports for about 5 years, I spent the next decade working in corporate AV, kind of for large companies that have like 5,000 employees, like Coca-Cola, SunTrust, kind of these big corporations. If they want to have a meeting with every employee, they have to make a show. It's got to be a program, right? So it's not aired on broadcast where I had come from. It's all streamed, and it's secure, and it's for employees, and it's things like that. But it used all the same equipment. I was still on a TriCaster. I was still, that company was called Event Streams, and I was there for about a decade. We spun off and kind of turned it into a creative agency at one point. And after the pandemic, we actually went really hard in like virtual production and things like that. But all the real basic kind of foundational learnings that I got in those early years I've built on those over and over. And so what I want to do is I want Amitrace to be able to provide the kind of support that I wish I had when I was the kid learning how to do everything. Wrapping cables, trying to figure out how to edit. It was a videotape-based workflow back then. So they don't know how good they have it now. But that's what I want to do. So I have a real passion for that. And when Faraz called me up and things were really kind of taking off with Vid Pod, the time felt perfect, And I was looking to move on because I had done 10 years at this spot, and this just was such a cool opportunity. So.
Very cool. Yeah, it's a real blessing to have you on the team so far. I mean, you just coming in with a fresh look, and obviously having that background as a student, and and as someone who cares about the education. You talked about Vid Pod. I got to do a sales piece real quick. This show's produced on a Vid Pod.
I love it.
4 cameras, 4 mics, everything you need. The great thing about the Vid Pod, this is something that I feel like it's hard to communicate, is the flexibility and the portability of the Vid Pod. And you just before the show, you're like, well, where does the Ethernet plug in? I was like, we don't plug in Ethernet. It's made to roll and move and be a mobile thing. So if you want information about the Vid Pod, amitrace.com/podcast, or you can find it on our socials at Amitrace Computer Systems. We've got to figure out how to change that got a good size group, but that's the old school name. So transitioning into kind of your current role, what are you excited to do? What are you excited to learn about?
Oh man, there's so many different things that Amitrace is doing right now. I spent all week diving into a studio desk that's about to go out to a middle school near here. It was kind of in its final stages, so I was able to get in and kind of see how it was all set up. I've been poring over Pete's studio diagrams and schematics and cables and all that sort of stuff. And I come from a place where I was my background is really in filmmaking and screenwriting and video producing. That was what I did at Emory University, and I've worked in that space kind of on my own since then with various people. And film. I'm getting very artsy on us, but film is the place. It's the kind of first place where all of the disciplines of art, like visuals, music, sound, dialogue, writing, art, and industry, business come together. Because you cannot make a film, especially for a long time, you cannot make a film by yourself with a pencil, right? Like you can draw or write a play. You need to have a technological component. You got to understand cameras. You got to understand microphones and audio and lights and everything. And so what my job always is to connect those two worlds, because I've spent enough time in both, where we have our engineers that do a great job building these very capable, very custom desks, right? And then we have our sales side that you guys have such good relationships with the educators and the students and the school districts trying to create the curriculum around this stuff, and there has to be a bridge there. Sometimes the highly technical stuff is great for the studio to be able to do, but maybe that's not always where you start, right? You got to start simple and do simple well, and then let things build from there. So that's kind of all the different ways I'm trying to connect up those two sides and make things easier on the technical side, but also make the learning capabilities really robust for that. Because the last thing we want is your Vid Pod, your studio, your TriCaster to collect dust because it's too hard to use, right? We want you to be able to get in there. We want to remove all those barriers. We want to make it easy enough where you can make stuff with it, but also complicated enough so that when you get out of school, you know what you're doing.
Yeah. That's something that Faraz and I talk about regularly is, we can build really super simple content creation workflows. But for me, it's more important that transferable skill. If a kid knows how to make a video, that's great. If a kid knows how to tell a story, that's better. If a kid knows how to do both using industry level tools or something that mimics industry, that's a win for everybody. And that's kind of as I'm designing these workflows, that's my vision. And one of the things that as I'm training teachers and students is start with the basics and go from there. And if you can understand how to do both of those things, I've picked up a piece of Velcro and I have my little fidget now. Sorry, I realized I had it in front of the camera. If you can do that, then that's a win, and everybody goes away happy, and the equipment doesn't gather dust. I mean, that to me is honestly one of the most heartbreaking things when I go to a school and I see a closet full of equipment that you can tell. Like, I was at a school 6-8 months ago that had a new C300. It was probably 3 years old.
Oh, man.
When I opened the box, the owner's manual was still right there. I was like, it's heartbreaking. It really is, because I look at that as opportunity missed for those kids, and that's that irritates me.
I mean, a C300 is what you use to make real television, and you could learn on that. You could learn on a C100, which is like the baby version of that. But, what you don't know is what you don't know. When you're that age, you're really being able to have experienced professionals that say, here is something that would be excellent for you to know. And even if you learn 15% of it, you're fine. I remember at Parkview for editing, for post, we had 3 different systems. And one, was an Avid Media Composer, right? And that's literally what Hollywood made their films on forever. It was an extremely powerful computer, and the workflow and the way it worked was very old Hollywood mindset about reels and bins and the cutting room floor. And you had to have a degree in IT to be able to use it. And I think one person used that in our school, but we had a bunch of Sony Vegas computers, Sony Vegas 6. I don't know. It was a long time ago, and it's not what I use now. I use Premiere now or Final Cut or something else, but it doesn't matter because it's what you talked about. It's like if you work with something similar, right? You figure out how to think about, not just about story, but about segments and about clips and when to start your in point and your out point, right? Your rhythm, and you can learn all that on any system. What were we talking about yesterday? You did your first cutting on the world's best program.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you're not supposed to use After Effects
to
cut?
You learned it on After Effects.
And it was what I had access to and what made sense. Premiere to me at the time was confounding. I could not in my brain, I could not figure it out. And I don't know why After Effects, because it should be the opposite. Premiere should be the simple one. And honestly, I think what it was Video Copilot. Do you remember Video Copilot?
Oh, yeah.
That stuff that Andrew Kramer used to do. And I could sit down and I could go, okay, so this is, and that was, I could make really cool stuff. And I didn't know I was doing it wrong at the time.
Right.
And then once I found out, I was like, oh, I'm so stupid.
There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah.
And then, right. But no, it really is. You learned on After Effects because you had a good resource and a good teacher, right? I learned, the Adobe Suite Premiere from, just YouTube videos on the ground up. But my formal education in editing was on Final Cut 7, which ended up being very similar to Premiere at the time. So that really worked. And there's so much, content creation is such a technological field, but the technology changes so much that you're going to get so much more mileage about understanding story, understanding your beats, your beginning, your middle, your end, understanding where your clips live, shooting enough B-roll or enough content to be able to create something at the end of it, knowing what to cut, which is always the hardest thing, So
yeah, I learned after I figured out that there's something better than After Effects. I learned how to edit in Premiere sitting on I-20. I would watch podcasts because traffic, and this was before it was against the law, and we were all stupid. And I literally would have a phone mount on my dash, and I would just be sitting in traffic and slowly, because I was working in downtown. So I, 2-3 hours a day.
Allegedly.
2-3 hours a day, I was sitting in traffic doing nothing. And that was how I learned that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think about how dumb I was just watching video. Of course, now I see people watching Netflix going down the road. How do
you think about, this is a question I love to ask people, how do you think about tutorial videos, right? Because, obviously nowadays, anything you want to learn how to do, there's 100 different videos on how to do it online. Some are helpful, some aren't. And me and some of my film friends have this discussion that I feel like when someone gives you some demo footage and says, follow along and do this with me, right? And then at the end you have to, you're trying to recreate what they've had. That's one way to learn how to do it. What I like to do is actually have a project I'm working on and take on projects that have pieces I don't know. And then instead of just playing around with a tool in Photoshop or in Premiere and trying to learn how it works, if I have something I need to do and then I go find a video on how to do it and I'm able to do it for my project and not just recreating their thing, it sticks in my head more because I learned it, I figured it out, and I was able to do it, as opposed to kind of following those step-by-step guides. What do you find? And I think that's just how I learn. So what do you find?
So I'm a mix. So obviously with education background, I did both. So you had, let's get you the basics. And it was easy for me to go, okay, this one looks exactly like that one. And I could easily check off, they know how to ingest, they know how to cut, they know how to export, done. When it gets to the more advanced stuff, I think that is where it's important to create that synthesis of, oh, if I do this, then this happens, and then this happens. And that was, for me, I used to joke that when I was in the classroom, one of the greatest payments for me, because it wasn't money, was when what I call the hokey pokey moment, where the kid would go, oh, that's what it's all about. And it's like, okay.
Turn yourself around.
Yeah, exactly. And
I love that.
Because they had synthesized, like, okay, so I know how to do it. How is easy? Why is the hard part? So I'm both. I can see the argument for both, and that the foundational stuff needs to be formulaic. It needs to be rigid, but then the advanced stuff, the challenging stuff, the stuff that's unique to that individual, should be a little loose. And that was my style too. And even when I'm running contests and stuff now, I tell kids, I give you the cup, you fill it. So I give you everything to hold it. So for skills video contests, you've got your prompt, you've got your time, you've got your you've got all of these things. Now it's your job to put it all together, or whatever.
Build the puzzle.
Yeah, and honestly, I used to teach, and I still think this is true. That's how you make money. Everybody talks about thinking outside of the box. I want to think in the box, because that's where the money is. They don't keep the money outside of the safe. The money's in the safe, and I got to figure out how to, and in my role here, it's like my goals are these things. How do I get to those goals? Faraz doesn't tell me. He's like, hey, here's your goal, and I have to go figure out. That's what I always wanted for my students, was them to be able to figure out how to find that goal and figure out what to do.
Love it.
So for our viewers, really excited. Michael's going to kind of go on the conference trail with me a little bit this summer and spend some time meeting people and
mostly to get merch.
Yeah.
I need more squish balls,
more pins.
Been out of the game. Yeah.
But Michael's going to come around, and he'll be a fixture in the company, and he'll be one of the faces that people see day in and day out as we continue to kind of build the Amitrace brand and get Michael out there to meet some of our people.
Happy to meet you all.
So anything that we didn't talk about that we need to before we close?
I don't think so. I'm really excited to be in the education space now doing this. The past 10 years being in corporate, there's a lot of similar things. I'm running studios remotely for companies that have, IT people and communications professionals and executives doing executive messaging, and that is all great. Still requires quite a lot of hand-holding and teaching. So there's definitely crossover with there in education. But I love education. I love kids. My wife is a educator who you've actually known and come into contact with. She actually went and got her PhD in education. So she science teaching. So I already kind of live in the world and love it. And so I'm just really excited to kind of dig in and bring kind of my skill set to what's out there.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you, and look forward to doing more podcast episodes on the Vid Pod.
On the Vid Pod,
always. Amitrace.com/podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll post some more of these here pretty soon.
Pretty good.
Have a great day.